Welcome, everyone. I am delighted that you've decided to share some of your morning with us today. My name is Kate Piat-Eckert. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the director of the Mission Sustainability Initiative here at Forefront. I am just incredibly happy to welcome our panelists and everyone who has decided to join us this morning for this conversation. So the Mission Sustainability Initiative exists to support organizations as they explore and implement sustained collaboration and strategic partnership. We do this through three core ways. Confidential consultations are a really key part of our work. We create a space where organizational leaders, be they board chairs, executive directors, whoever is exploring this work, have a space to talk about collaboration and partnership strategy with knowing that no one else will know about our conversation and where it's completely okay to not know what you're talking about. There are a lot of ideas in this world. There's a lot of jargon in the world of partnership and collaboration, and many leaders explore and implement partnerships maybe once in their career. So for a lot of us, it's new. And so creating a space where we can have these conversations is really critical. A lot of our work involves connecting folks to other resources. So be that pro bono legal assistance, toolkits, case studies, consultants who are vetted by our advisory council as being really active in partnership development work. We have lots of resources we can connect folks to. And we do some grant making to support the one-time costs associated with partnership development. That might look like bringing in a consultant for an exploratory process, or an accountant for an implementation process to merge charts of accounts, for example. There are lots of ways that bringing in a little bit extra support during a partnership process can really set the collaboration up to thrive. And of course, we produce programs like this one that both share ideas and develop a community of collaboration. You are in a group of like-minded people who are excited to explore the impact we can have when we work together, and that is something to celebrate. We're immensely glad that you're here. And at the MSI, we work with a really broad range of strategic partnerships, all of which share the goal of preserving, expanding, or improving the reach, impact, or efficiency of the services that nonprofits deliver to their communities. There really is profound impact in working together, and we see more impactful community organizations, more impactful nonprofit sector as we develop these partnerships. And from organizations working together to advance common goals through alliances and networks, to organizations sharing administrative functions or back-end functions in order to free up bandwidth to focus on program delivery, to organizations joining together to create new integrated structures through mergers or asset transfers. These partnerships can represent multiple ways that organizations can do more together than they can on their own. If you'd like to learn more about some of these partnership models, we recently hosted a conversation about advancing strategy through partnership that walks through a lot of these details. This was a very high-level summary. There's a lot more to it than this. And we'll add a link to the recording of that session to the chat if you'd like a little background on some of this information. And again, I also encourage you to reach out to me anytime you'd like to talk more or learn more about what we mean by any of these collaboration types. Partnership is a powerful tool and a multifaceted tool for nonprofit organizations to expand their impact and build more resilient structures that center the communities they serve. But like any tool, they can't be wielded effectively without a bit of preparation, and that is why we are here today. We are joined by three extraordinary leaders with deep and varied experience in developing and guiding nonprofit collaboration. And we're going to discuss how organizations, leaders, and boards can prepare themselves for vibrant, thriving collaborations. I will ask each of our guests to introduce themselves and the perspectives they bring to this work, and then we'll begin our conversation.
Kate, thank you so much for arranging this webinar. I think it's a really important series that you've pulled together, so thank you. And it's wonderful to be here with two very esteemed colleagues. So my name is Judy Carabo. I'm the Chief Collaborations Officer. It's probably the best title I've had in my entire career, but I'm the Chief Collaborations Officer for Mission Plus Strategy. We provide capacity building consulting services to nonprofits. That includes things like strategic planning, theories of change, succession planning, as well as strategic partnership facilitation services. Before that, I've spent, I like saying 30 plus years instead of nearly 40 years. I said that the other day, and it almost made me choke. Um, but I've spent a long time in nonprofits, mostly as executive director. And I think what's really wonderful about Mission Plus Strategy is we're a nonprofit organization of nonprofit leaders and former nonprofit executives. So really having not just the theoretical knowledge, but also the firsthand experience when we're providing services. And when it comes to partnerships, I've led a variety of partnerships from a facilitation perspective, but also led the merger of a nonprofit organization that I led for very strategic reasons. And actually, Toyin was on my board and a very important part of that process. So again, thank you, Kate.
Thank you. Toyin, since Judy set you up there, why don't we hear from you?
Thank you very much, Kate. And hello, everyone. Saying hello from Montgomery, Alabama. Pronouns are he, his, him. I am a recently retired HR executive. Unlike Judy, was 30 plus years. I don't like the idea of, it was 20 years, but 30 plus years in global HR roles across the world. I am currently I'm currently an adjunct professor at Southern New Hampshire University in global human resources. My wife and I run our own foundation that focus on empowering women in sub-Saharan Africa with micro grants, educational opportunities, and also we are very, very, very big into ensuring that women, especially, are free from gender-based violence. So that's what we focus on. I'm a consultant side around succession planning and leadership, but mostly for nonprofits, as it were. So over the last 30 plus years, I've been involved in a lot of M&As, mostly for in-for-profit situations, but a lot of non-for-profits as well. And I really do look forward to talking about the differences or the lack thereof in some of the processes in which I've been involved over the last few years. So thanks for coming, and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Toyin. Jennifer.
Greetings, I'm Dr. Jennifer Madden, and I'm president of Leverage Point Development, which is a boutique consulting company. And boutique is fancy for just me. And because I'm a very conservative entrepreneur, I also have a day job where I serve as the dean for the School of Business for Linfield University. And my work around collaboration, that's the research that I did in my doctoral program. It was really important for me to bring insight from research to practitioners. So I was a practitioner before I went back to get a PhD. And it was really important to bring those tools to the front lines and so that practitioners could have useful tools, because it's common wisdom that we should collaborate, but it's not common practice. And so we need the assistance and support so that we can be successful in the work. I had seen organizations achieve things much greater than themselves when they were able to work in collaboration. And, you know, if I could add value into having a better understanding of how we could make collaborations impactful, that was incredibly important for me in my work. I have my graduate students here, so in Barcelona. So greetings from Barcelona. It's been a lovely day today, and so we're out trying to tackle collaborative challenges and design thinking, and it's really powerful work. So excited to be here. Thanks, Kate.
Thank you so much for joining us all. Toyin, I'd like to start with you to lay a little bit more groundwork for our conversation. As you said, you have a lot of experience in mergers and other collaborations in both the corporate and the nonprofit sectors. And I wonder if you might speak a little to how these types of partnership processes are different in the nonprofit space.
Absolutely, Kate. If one should think of some of the key processes around partnerships and collaboration, it really starts with the strategy and developing a strategy and assessment around it, then targeting a partner, as it were, or a list of partners, evaluating whether that partnership would work or not. And in the for-profit world, it's more financial. In the not-for-profit world, it really is about mission focus, doing the due diligence, closing the deal, then doing all the backroom integration and post-merger integration stuff. So those things are not really different. Where it becomes very different is when you get to the nonprofit world, you're really talking about mission focus and how do we expand our social services footprint. And that discussion almost never happens in a for-profit world. It may happen through ESG or environmental discussions or DE&I, but it never happens in terms of I'm going to buy this company or I'm going to acquire a different partner. And my whole focus is to ensure that our mission is going to live on through a social footprint. It just doesn't happen. In a not-for-profit organization, it's about expanding the social capital footprint and doing that in a way that brings partners along. Now, having said that, I happen to be in a very unique situation right now where I'm consulting with a for-profit organization that wants to acquire a not-for-profit organization, essentially to get a set of capabilities around community involvement and having very interesting discussions with the CEO about the different metrics they should look at in terms of infrastructure and how you value assets, etc. And I can't seem to do a good job of explaining that in the not-for-profit world, it's about a social footprint. It's about services. It's about enhancing your footprint in the world, in the areas in which you live and work. And it's not just about having something on the balance sheet to report to the board at the end of the month. So it's been a really interesting discussion, and it highlights for me the differences between a for-profit and a not-for-profit partnership. And it's, in this case, it just happens to be stock. So,
That's really interesting. Thank you. Yeah, I think we see a lot of resonance there and sort of the for-profit versus nonprofit business model as a whole, but that really distills down to how we look at partnership strategy. It's really interesting.
right.
Judy, collaborations between organizations often feel like they start to take shape organically. We meet people, relationships evolve, and we're collaborating. Why should we focus on readiness or preparing for collaboration before we even have a partnering organization in mind, or before we even know what we want out of a partnership?
Yeah, that's a good question, Kate. I think we learn about partnerships by their structure, right? There's a lot of information out in the world about the different kinds of partnerships. And I think where we don't have as much information or research on is around this kind of human element, right? So partnerships are not just transactional. They're very relational. In fact, I think they're more relational than they are transactional, and the transactional needs to support the relational. And it's because it's relational that the preparation ends up being so key. And so I see partnerships in this kind of partnership philosophy and this collaborative leadership lens being both an internal focus as well as an external focus. So by that, what I mean is we look at partnerships and we automatically think about who are we going to partner with, right? And we forget that those exact same characteristics and skills that we need to partner externally are things that we need to also be looking at internally. And how do we internally become increasingly collaborative and partner among the different departments within our organization to build a culture that is then collaborative externally? And so even if somebody doesn't go through a partnership in the end, what they've done then is built this very collaborative kind of culture internally that can be extremely creative and very innovative. I think we sometimes think about partnerships, if we're thinking about it externally, as something that is going to rescue an organization from crisis, whether it's a crisis of succession planning or a crisis financially. And I think we need to begin to think about partnerships as a plan that we do just like any other plan. We have succession plans in our organizations, we have strategic plans in our organization, we have business disaster plans. So we have all of these plans in place. One of those plans should also be a strategic partnership. And that if you leverage it and you find that partner organically, that's great. You've got the things in place to be able to leverage that plan. If you don't, like I said earlier, you've got a lot of elements in place that you can use in other forms to help the organization build capacity and expand. So I think there's a variety of reasons why preparation is really important. You need to be bringing a whole bunch of humans along, and we all move at different paces through change. And so having that time to help people move through change, I think, is really important. And in the end, if you don't execute this plan, there's a lot of other really great benefits that happen as a result of you're preparing for a partnership.
That's really exciting. I want to dig in a little bit to something you just said about thinking about the sort of culture of collaboration internally between departments. I think is true even in tiny organizations that might not think they have departments, but whenever there are multiple people, there's space for collaboration. Can you talk a little bit more about sort of what that looks like, what an internal culture of collaboration looks like?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So when I came on board as the executive director of Family Shelter Service, we had some very significant departmental silos. And I knew that we needed at some point in time to look at a partnership strategy, whether we were to be acquired or to acquire. And I know acquiring is not, it can kind of like trigger folks, for the lack of a better word. But the reality is it was on our strategic plan from, early on in my tenure with the organization. And I knew in order to get to the external partnership, we had to be much more collaborative internally and break down those silos across the organization, so that we could actually, when we needed to, divert resources from one department that might be more resource rich to another department that in that particular year or quarter needed more resources. And so there were a variety of things that we did to be able to get to a culture where we could ebb and flow, and that there was ownership. No matter what department you were in, there was ownership of the organization and of the other departments within the organization. So it was really this mind shift that needed to happen.
That's great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Jennifer, your research focuses on the relationship between some of the qualities and skills held by leaders and the outcomes of their future collaborations. Can you speak to what you call the ABCDs of successful collaboration, and how those leadership skills support organizational partnerships?
No, super excited too. When I talked about really bringing the tools to practitioners, one very useful way is to create an acronym. And so the ABCDs for successful collaboration, in my research, what emerged was this idea that if you wanted organizations to work well together, that they really needed a collaboration maker, really someone to kind of assist them through the difficult work of collaboration. And in that, they could be reminded of the ABCDs. And so the first is A, which is autonomy. Oftentimes when organizations are working together in collaboration, they do feel as both as Toyin has really raised, that there might be a merger or an acquisition, but sometimes organizations are authentically and genuinely working together to achieve something bigger than they can do alone. And so reminding those collaborations that, there's an expectation that they should retain their autonomy and bring their gifts to the collaborative effort is very powerful. But also the reminder takes us to B, and the B stands for boundary span. And that's an understanding that the collaborative partners need to go outside of the collaboration and bring resources and gifts and tools that might be needed by the collaborative partners. The C is all about shared vision, but ABSD didn't have the same ring to it. So shared vision, common vision felt pretty connected. But it's extremely powerful to create a common vision for your collaborative partners. The common vision is so important because collaboration is fraught with barriers. But if you can set your eyes on a shared vision, kind of keep your eyes on the prize, it will help the collaborations really get through some of those inherent barriers and challenges and really stay focused on the bigger picture. And that fuels the collaboration to enable it to push through. And the D for the ABCDs of collaboration is all about design thinking and design attitude. And so design thinking is simply about imagining a new way of doing, imagining a future that doesn't yet exist. It's the ability to be comfortable with some of the ambiguity, not having all of the answers, but be willing to walk forward to see what might come to fruition. And this idea of a design attitude is really important in that D, because it, you know, as faculty or as professionals, we often use what's called a decision attitude. And what a decision attitude suggests is that we have choice A and choice B. And we know historically that choice A nor choice B have worked effectively for us. So why are choice A and choice B still the options for us? But instead, we can disrupt that and take a design attitude and just understand that the solution may not exist. We need to create a solution that works better for us, because these default solutions don't work. But that's what a design attitude suggests: moving beyond default solutions in search for a more viable, more impactful, solution for the collaboration. And when I really think about some of the skills that are essential, I don't think I have anything earth shattering, but I will tell you that emotional intelligence is a very, very powerful tool to be impactful in collaboration work. Self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship management, those components are really powerful. What also emerged in my research was the idea of active listening is really, really critical. This notion that we have to pay attention to what our collaborative partners are saying, what's happening around us, so that we can not only look at the nonverbal cues, the things that people say and that they don't say, because, and this brings me to the second piece that emerged in my work, that if you really want to have a very impactful collaboration, everybody has to act selfishly. And so I call this concept mutually beneficial exploration, that the collaborative partners have to be operating selfishly, because when you have some skin in the game, or when it's really important for you to get something out of this collaboration, you're going to be more involved in it. You're going to lean in more. So you need to actively listen to make sure your partners have some mutual benefit from participation in that collaboration. Those are incredibly useful tools and techniques that I think can be very helpful.
Oh, thank you so much. I'll admit,
Yes.
when I was reading your research, the design thinking component is the part that I get really excited about. I'm wondering if you can share a quick example of sort of what design thinking looks like in a nonprofit leadership context, as I think there are a lot of ways we can imagine that working, but I'm curious what you've seen.
It's so rich that sometimes I'll suggest that organizations lean into, again, some of the tools. For example, it could be looking at assessing a situation and doing something like a visual SWOT analysis. Nonprofits are very comfortable and understand SWOT analysis, but if they use this visual SWOT analysis, where there's an exercise where they look at the strengths, the weaknesses, and the opportunity, and then they code these sort of like different strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities with color sticky notes that align with strengths, that align with weaknesses, that align with opportunities, and then cluster, for example, they can look at a situation and see, when we read through this strategy, this way forward, here are some of the clusters that emerge, and then immediately visually you can see where the opportunities in that strategy are, where the strengths and where the weaknesses are. And so visually, immediately where you need to lead with your strengths and where you need to mitigate on your weaknesses. Another really amazing kind of tool in the design thinking space is a technique that is called the creative matrix. But at its core, what it suggests is that, first we need to tap into divergent thinking, and convergent thinking. And the way that I like to simplify it is that, first you create choices, then you make choices. So again, the skill set around coming up with ideas and ways forward, and then determining which of those make the most sense. So both this kind of divergent and convergent thinking, creating choices and making choices. But again, the most powerful part about design thinking that ignites and excites me and the work that I do is just this commitment to imagining that future that doesn't yet exist, this willingness to push through, a willingness to involve end users in the creation of a way forward, and just the disruption of the typical ways of doing. But I tell you, there's so many amazing design thinking tools that I think I could do a full day's webinar on just my top 5 tools. So.
Well, I might have to call you back about that. And yeah, I think, and what I love about it is it's both tools, but it's also this paradigm of rejecting the idea that the only options we have are the ones we already know don't work, which we
Yes.
often all get stuck in. So I'm excited about opening our minds a little bit in that way. Thank you. Toyin, I'd love to talk a little bit more about how, it looks like maybe you have something you want to say before I ask you a question.
Actually, I was going to build on what Dr. Madden said, but
Great, go
I
for it.
can do it in the
Yeah.
context of your next question
No,
if you
no,
want.
go for it.
But you've made some really good points around design thinking, because at the end of the day, it's about adult learning theory and how do we get adults to think differently. And the example I will use, one of my favorite tools are called learning maps, and it's like a Monopoly board game. I'm sure you've seen them. It's like a Monopoly. It looks like something for kids, but the adults get into it, but it expands their thinking. It opens the aperture, if you would, in terms of the art of the possible. So I just really wanted to build on that great point that she was making in terms of
Yes.
design thinking.
Harnessing that capacity for play
Right.
is so
Yes.
powerful as we design future worlds. I love
Yeah,
that.
adults like children want to play too. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm at work, I might as well have some fun
Yes.
with it. And that is truly the essence of design thinking. So thank you for bringing that up.
yeah, I love that. I'd love to hear more, Toyin, about sort of your experience as a board member participating in a nonprofit merger. Can you talk about, from your experience, what the role of a board of directors is in preparing for that collaboration?
I always saw my role, and I see others in this space roles in on the board as really in 4 things. One is decision making. Obviously, that has to come to the board. Uh, but I have to be invested in that decision making process, because not just a fiduciary responsibility, but a social responsibility as well. So that's thing number one. Thing number two is this notion of providing direction and oversight to enable the executive director to be successful as they go forward with this collaboration and partnership. Thing number three is around there's some level of fiduciary responsibility from a P&L standpoint. I know this is contradictory to what I said earlier, but at the end of the day, while it's still about expanding a social footprint, we can't expand a social footprint if we're broke. So this notion of what's the fiduciary underpinning of this collaboration effort is key. And lastly, and this is sometimes where boards drop it, is this post-merger stuff. So we get to the closure, have the deal, order pizza to celebrate, then everyone is off and running. But the post-merger stuff, as Judy would tell you, is where the real work starts. And board members can't just drop it and move on. There has to be some work around, okay, what does it look like now that we have this collaboration partner? And it almost always breaks down because there's no good post-merger execution. So I see the role of the board in that dimension. And I think a part B to, how do you prepare the board for this? I will tell you it's a lot of upfront work. Um, having a partnership strategy without an engaged board is just a really bad idea. And I think if we don't have a board that fully understands the mission, vision, strategy of the organization, it's a false positive. It's just, so however you measure the metrics of board engagement, that has to be thing number one. I think thing number two is really around the CEO board relationship. Because this is one of the fundamental currencies of any partnership or collaboration effort is trust. And if there's no trust, or if there's agita between the CEO and the board, that's just going to be all around suboptimal. And lastly, to prepare the board, I think requires, I hate to use this word, but guerrilla warfare in terms of communication. Talking to each and every board member to make sure there's full and tactical alignment about go forward. And that is, Judy knows I have this favorite saying, communication is a currency of the realm. If you don't get that right, then you don't have an engaged and prepared board. uh, get into by the time you get to the LOI, the letter of intent, if you have a board that's still divided, that's just going to not, it's just going to prolong the process, and frankly will affect some of the post partnership collaboration work.
Yeah, what you're saying rings so true in many of the collaborations that I have looked at that have not come to fruition, that things are moving along, it seems like everything is fine, and then we get to the, where everyone's close to signing paperwork, and it turns out there are a few board members who just fundamentally don't understand what we're doing or have a counter argument that might be really valid but hasn't been voiced yet. So having those conversations early and often, if you will, feels really, really critical. Yeah, I love, yeah, please.
I'm sorry, if I could just build in on what Toyin's saying and kind of in a way connect it back to what Jennifer was saying too, is this, I think it's important to have this mindset as a leader of an organization on the board or as the CEO or executive director of abundance versus scarcity in this process, right? And I think what makes that important is when we operate out of scarcity, we're not going to be building trust in healthy ways with board and with staff and with stakeholders. We're not going to be creative. We don't operate creatively, sorry about that, or creatively.
It's a creative way to say creatively. I love it.
We don't operate creatively when we're in this scarcity mentality, right? We start hunkering down and we get defensive and we want to kind of take this, kind of defensive posture. But if we can think about this strategy from a framework of abundance, communication becomes a lot easier, trust becomes a lot easier, creativity becomes a lot easier. And so I think really being able to create this abundance kind of approach during this process can really be a foundation for success. And I think it all hinges on what Jennifer said earlier, the emotional intelligence of folks leading this work. And I'll call myself out. I think, one of the things early on in my journey was being very conflict averse, right? And there's going to be conflict in a partnership. It's just human nature. And so I needed to get comfortable with conflict and grow my emotional intelligence in that area if I was going to lead an organization through conflict or through a partnership strategy. And so all of that takes time to do, right? Building your own capacity as a leader, building capacity in relationship with the board and stakeholders, all of that takes time. So I think there's this beautiful kind of connection between what Toyin is saying and what Jennifer's saying that I just really wanted to highlight.
I love that. You go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say too that that Judy is so incredibly spot on, and so, but this is a tall ask. But another sort of hack, workaround way to get through it is really grounded in this research called intentional change theory. But the most important part of it is just this, that if you're going to have that abundance mindset, you want to build and cultivate your emotional intelligence, your ability to stay in a positive space really does enable you to further down that road. And the most important part is the way that our brains are wired, just to remember that a negative interaction is not offset by a single positive interaction. You need 7 positive interactions to offset a negative interaction. So I tell my clients all the time, like, if you've had a negative interaction, go watch you some cat videos. Take a look at, some pictures of your kids when you went on vacation that time and it was really an amazing space, so you can get back in your square and get back to this kind of positive mindset so you can continue the difficult work. But again, getting back to that positive space will take you to that abundance mindset, will get you through the difficult work that that you might need to move to.
Yeah, I think something that you all are saying that's really resonating with me and ringing true is this idea that when we're afraid of losing something that we have, that emotion is incredibly strong. And when we think about the excitement or joy in getting something new, it's a positive emotion, but it's much less strong than the fear of losing something we have. And so really building that abundance is about heightening the experience of anticipating gain so that it is stronger than the fear of loss. And I think it takes, as you've all said, that incredible emotional intelligence among leadership to really help the entire organization navigate that space, and probably a lot of cat videos. So yes, yes to that. Judy, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what sort of, and you touched on this a little bit earlier, but dig in a little bit more to what preparing for partnership strategy, what role that plays in developing overall organizational strategy, how it's not just a solution for points of crisis, but really looking at how we build our organizational growth strategies.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think it's about this intentionality about how can you kind of, take these steps, very thoughtfully and intentionally along the way that are cumulative in effect, right? And so, I think I want to get a little bit more more tactical here, and it's about, you know, talk about it as part of your strategic planning process, right? It's a lot easier to talk about strategic partnership when you're talking about it a little bit more theoretically than you are saying in this particular moment, in this particular instance, right? And you can get people prepared by reading articles about partnerships, talking to folks and bringing folks in who've had successful partnerships and what have they gained, right? It's like what you just said a moment ago, Kate. It's about this building this, like, what are you able to gain with this vision that is greater than what you might lose, right? And I would echo what Jennifer said earlier about this common vision is so important, and so important to define that early on. It took us a little while, going back to the family shelter service example, it took us a little while to be very clear about why were we doing this strategic partnership. And once we got that why really clearly identified collectively as a group, it really shaped who our partner was going to be, and really was the North Star, so that when things did get challenging, we had that to hold on to, that what we could do together that we couldn't achieve alone. And so being very clear about your why and taking that time to define that collectively is really important. And that, again, takes time and preparation. It's preparing the culture, right, on collaboration. And so reading books, doing audiobooks, talking about that with your staff. It's important to work on the business, not in the business. We use that phrase an awful lot, right? And this kind of strategy is about working on the business, right? It's the strategy that's going to get you to increase capacity. And so, leaders should be spending at least a couple of hours every week, if not more, like 2 to 5 hours a week. I think there's a Forbes article that says about 5 hours a week. Leaders should be spending and working on strategy. That next kind of executive, the middle kind of management should spend maybe an hour every week on strategy, but every level of the organization needs to be spending time on strategy. It's at different kinds of intervals, right? But if you're not working on strategy, then you're just reacting. And then all of a sudden, one day you're going to look up and you're go, how did we get here? This is not where we intended, right? The strategy is your map for getting to that ultimate destination, that ultimate capacity. And so, putting it on a strategic plan, learning about what partnerships are like, reading books on collaborative strategies internally, those are all really important steps to be able to really begin to build this culture of collaboration. And in my time in nonprofits, the complexities that nonprofits have to face has increased exponentially than 35 years ago. If you just look at GATA, the Government Accountability and Transparency Act, and the implementation of that over these last 5 years, the amount of regulations nonprofits have to face is just incredible. And so we, I think, are better off approaching that complexity collaboratively than individually, right? And I think we see that with more kind of shared leadership opportunities. We see more co-executive directors than we've ever seen before. And we're seeing much more insofar as strategic partnerships to address big social issues. All that to be said is things have gotten a lot more complex, and we're have a greater likelihood of being able to solve these complex issues if we come together and pool the resources instead of fighting for resources. If we share resources instead of fighting for resources. I kind of got off on a little bit of a tangent there and a little bit of a soapbox. Kate, I hope that answered the question.
Oh, fantastic. It's a soapbox. I'm on right there with you. It's great. Yeah, Jennifer.
I just want to give another kind of hack on that, because the thing that's just incredibly important to remember is that you take a strength-based approach. You know, we can only be distinctive in our areas of strength. When you're leaning into your strengths, that's when you're thriving. That's when you're excited about the work. And so sometimes when we think strategically, there is a default notion to try and address and fix the things that we're weak at. But I'm suggesting that you put that down and instead focus on the things that you're very strong at and lift up those things, those gifts, that approach. That strength-based approach will be the thing that will take you very, very far.
That's really exciting. Twain, I think it might just be your presence here and your talk about your farm, but I'm coming up with all kinds of farming analogies in my head about the importance of preparing soil and picking the right crops for your climate and everything everyone's saying. I'm now translating into farm analogies. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
I think so. I have a couple of more questions for our group, but I encourage our audience here, if there are things that are resonating, ideas you want to dig into more, clarification you'd like of anything we've said, please feel free to pop it in chat, or if you'd like to voice it, feel free to raise your hand, and I'm happy to welcome you to the conversation. But I'm wondering if each of our panelists can share an example of a great collaboration that they have seen or experienced, or one that went awry, and sort of what made the difference there. Of course, we don't need to name names, but just you know, from your experience, and I know you've all seen a lot of collaborations. Would anyone like to begin?
Sure, I could
Thank you.
give it a go. So I'll start with what went well, the positive one, and there were really three things. We talked about having an aligned board. There was a lot of upfront work in terms of reconstituting the board. Out of 11 members, we had to find a way to ask 7 to leave. So getting the right board mindset with different and varied and diverse capabilities and a diverse board was key. Secondly, there was also this notion of having a great leadership team for the not-for-profit organization. She had done a good job of building this team over a couple of years, and actually pushed the board back when we wanted to move forward with a partnership with a partner, because I simply don't have the team to execute it. Give me 2 years. Let me build the capabilities of my team, and we'll be ready to go. And she was spot on. And lastly, there was a heck of a lot of communication. And I keep on going back to the calm strategy has to be forefront. And it was everything from weekly one-on-ones to, you know, sometimes daily discussions and daily phone calls to make sure that we were all inextricably aligned when it came to pull the trigger. And post-merger integration was also very well done. What didn't go well? There was one I was involved in that I think it's not polar opposites per se of what I just said, but one of the things, and I'll start with post-merger integration. There's a book called "Don't Sweat the Small Stuff." It's all small stuff. This was truly an example of where you had to sweat the small stuff because it was all important. I had no idea that cherry soda could be so important to people. um, I don't like it myself. I don't get it, but we changed cherry sodas in all the apparently went to healthier snacks in all the partners vending machines, and you would have thought we were going to drop an atomic bomb on the on these places. I've never had so many emails. I've never about cherry soda, but it wasn't about the cherry soda. It was about the emotional connection to change. And we missed the boat on that and actually almost tanked the partnership that we were going for. The second component is, having board members that are not fully pulling their weight. And this was the case. They're just, they just weren't there for the organization. You look at all the metrics, won't show up for meetings, won't read the material, will ask silly questions at meetings that we just covered literally 20 minutes ago. And having a disengaged board was, made this go badly. And I'll go back to the EQ part that Jennifer talked about. It's actually, Jennifer will tell you, possible to measure EQ. And we just had some folks who had very low EQ, very, very bright, but had a distinct disdain for either some people that were working within the organization and the foundation or other board members. And having to clean that up from a cultural standpoint was then darn near impossible after the partnership went through. So those are, I've had good ones, I've had bad ones. I like to say I learned more from the good ones, but I've learned a lot from the ones that didn't go so well as well.
Absolutely. There's no such thing as a failure, just a new way to learn.
Precisely. I like to think of it that way. Didn't think of it at the time, but yeah, now it was a good learning platform for me.
For sure. Judy, I saw you come off mute. Do you have examples you'd
Yeah,
like to share?
yeah, I think to build off of Toyin's list, and I think that list is spot on. I think for the ones that have worked really well, they're inclusive in the process, right? So even the naysayers, even somebody who goes, I don't believe in a partnership strategy, this doesn't make any sense, to really bring them in and consciously, overtly solicit what their viewpoint is, right? We need all of that knowledge in this pool of knowledge to be able to make the best decision. And so I think the most successful ones are the ones that are really inviting divergent opinions in this whole process, because those, you're going to see things that you might have missed if you don't include, if you're including the really broad, diverse array of opinions. So I think the inclusiveness is really important. And I think you can only move as fast as the speed of the group in this process. And so this, being attuned to how you're bringing people, and again, this requires the emotional intelligence. How are you bringing people along in this process? And at some point in time, you might have to go, can we all at least support this decision? After everybody's voice has been heard, can we all support this decision in the end? So that moving at the speed of the group, I think, is really, really important. And I couldn't agree more with Toyin's point about communication and being able to have difficult conversations, right? It's not necessarily conflict, but difficult conversations. And then the last part is, I think the successful partnerships are ones who are able to grieve what they've lost, right? Even though we're embracing something that is bigger and better and more abundant, we also have to grieve what we're losing and honor that with rituals and traditions that are important to the organization. And so really marking those milestones, I think, is really important and very, very important to those that are successful. I think the mergers that, or the partnerships, whether it's a merger or any other kind of partnership, I think the ones that can go awry are where we're not self-reflective. We're not really taking a good assessment of ourselves as leaders and where our strengths are and where our weaknesses are. And while I absolutely agree that we need to be strengths-based, right? I wouldn't be an LCSW if I wasn't fully bought into strengths-based. I do think it is important to challenge ourselves to improve those areas where we're weak. For me, it was conflict. And if I didn't improve that area, that would have been a real liability for the process. And so that self-reflectiveness and being really honest with yourself in this process, I think, is really important. And then being reality-based, right? I know that we're talking about North Star and having this vision for this future reality that we all want to be able to embrace, and really being able to kind of vision something greater than what we currently have. But we also have to be reality-based, right? If your balance sheet is upside down, then you shouldn't be talking about a partnership. You should be having other conversations about how do you begin to close things down. And so sometimes we can get overly optimistic, and it has to be grounded in reality. If our balance sheet is upside down, then our balance sheet is upside down, and we have other conversations we need to have.
Yeah, I think looking at partnership as a panacea to solve whatever problem is in the organization. I think there's a huge amount of potential in partnership, but it can't solve every challenge that we found along the way.
Exactly.
Yeah. Jennifer, do you have an example of a great collaboration you've seen and a really challenging one?
I do, and when I think of them, honestly, I think the power is there's a through line and maybe three key areas that where the successful collaborations got it right and the less successful collaboration didn't get it right. And it goes back to two of the things that Toyin raised, and that was this idea of trust. And Judy talked about it, the speed of trust is also a powerful piece. And so organizations have to invest the time to get to know each other and understand the work of their respective organizations so that trust can be built. And it's such a interesting thing, because I remember doing this research and during my doctoral program, and I'm like, trust, it came up everywhere that this was so important. And I was like, okay, yeah, this is nice, but nobody's gonna give me a PhD for this. But I have to tell you that the trust piece is incredibly critical. And then the other really, really important dynamic, again, that Toyin has talked about ad nauseum, but he is absolutely right. The communication piece is so important. I'm thinking of the collaboration that went very poorly. This was a collaboration around a very difficult, project, building affordable housing. And because of the lack of trust and the lack of communication, one of the partners had resources that they didn't want to, disclose, and the other partner was in need of resources that if only they had, they could close the gap on the project. Because there was this lack of trust and this lack of communication, they everybody was not doing any active listening, not communicating. So as you can imagine, the project fell down, and the very much needed affordable housing did not get built, and the organization had to return the resources that were grant resources. So a real tragedy. And the third component that emerges when I think about these two examples was the power dynamic. This idea that sometimes when we're thinking about collaborations, we don't necessarily pay attention to some of the solid issues that Judy raised, but we often just think of, if we don't have if we're not the bigger organization, or if we don't have the bigger budget, that we don't have the power. But community-based nonprofits, for example, bring a lot of power, and they might bring the connections to community, the ability to get buy-in, or to be a trusted messenger. But sometimes, because nonprofits don't have the larger balance sheet, and if thinking of collaborating with bigger organizations, the willingness to give up their power a little too quickly. So we have to really understand some of those power dynamics, and that power doesn't always equal resources. And I think that I just want to lift up a point that Judy raised, and that a real skill that's important in this work is bolstering your change management skills. Because when you're trying to manage change, it's really about understanding that change is very personal. And if you get that part of it, like you're already ahead and getting the work accomplished.
I love that. Thank you. I think we've been hearing a lot about sort of developing communications within the organization, developing a culture of collaboration between departments, developing change management skills. I'm wondering if, sort of as we think about what future collaborations can look like, if there's something we can be doing today, if our audience is a board member or a leader in an organization, what's something they can begin doing this afternoon that can help get them ready to take advantage of whatever partnership opportunities present themselves in the future.
I'll start with that one if that's okay. You know,
Yeah.
if really this is like your introduction to collaboration, right? And you're kind of thinking about this newly, I think being able to even do an assessment on yourself and your team on collaboration is a great way to start. And there's some out there, right? You can do there's one on by Turning Point that you can do. There's one from the International Institute on Collaboration, where you can assess yourself and you can assess your team and where are they at. And it's not so much about how it's scored as at least it gives you the topics to begin to talk about with your team and internally about where are we collaborative and in what spaces or aspects are we not collaborative, right? And then how can you even use that language when you're talking externally to partners? If you're farther down on the collaboration spectrum and you've done collaborations internally and you've done some collaborations externally, and you're now thinking about doing some specific strategic partnership with another organization, pick up the phone and ask somebody for coffee. It begins with a simple, organic kind of conversation about what do you think, or what are your challenges that you're experiencing, and how might we help each other out with our respective challenges. So ask that executive director out for coffee, or board member to board member, ask each other out for coffee. So it begins very relationally, I think.
Thank you. Toyin, what do you think we could start doing today?
Actually, Judy's last point was the point I was going to lean into a little bit more, because I think it's a great point, this notion of building your own personal board of directors around this topic. 6 to 7 like-minded individuals that you can reach out to and learn, because ultimately it's about building your own capability, and you can do that by doing that assessment that Judy talked about, lots of things online. But I think this notion of a person-to-person interaction, going out for coffee or lunch or a cherry soda, and really sitting down and having a discussion about, okay, tell me what it's really like. What do I need to learn? What do I need to stop doing? What do I need to begin doing? I think is critical. And building your own scorecard. What haven't I learned this week? What do I need to learn this week? Because it's a continuing process. I think my panelists will agree. We are all still learning, because this is such a very diverse space. But again, this notion of reaching out to folks and having a personal board of directors, I think is critical.
And I think I would go back to that design thinking technique that I referenced earlier. It's called the rose thorn bud. As you think about the possibilities for collaboration, what are some of the strengths? What are some of the which are the roses? What are some of the weaknesses? Which are the thorns? And what are some of the opportunities? So that you can again lead from your strengths and better understand how to mitigate some of your weaknesses and leverage your opportunities.
Thank you. I have one last question for our group, but I want to make sure we're not missing any questions from the audience today. Is there anything anyone would like to ask, either in chat or off mute, or anything you'd like some more detail about? And we've covered a lot of different ideas that touch on organizational strategy broadly, but I think really prepare us for collaboration. Or from our panelists, do you have any questions for each other that you want to make sure we're digging into before we close things out today?
I hope I don't take a question that you might be asking Kate, but I would be curious from both the panelists, as you look back on your experience with regards to partnerships, and it could be the external strategic partnerships or could even be internal, what was your most transformative lesson in this journey? Like, what
Yeah.
transformed your thinking about partnerships?
So for me, it will go back. It will be go back to a little bit of what I talked about earlier. It's truly the hard stuff is the soft stuff. It's the personal engagement, the interrelationship. Early when I first did this in my career, I think it was in South Africa. It was, transforming a bunch of bottling plants, and we bought some, and we're gonna have collaborative partnerships with Guinness Stout, etc. And I had my little spreadsheet, I had my process maps, I had my my flow charts. So proud of myself. Now when it didn't work because forgot about the soft stuff, the people, the genuine interactions, the grape soda examples, the hard stuff is the soft stuff, and if we don't get the soft stuff right, it never works. That's why most partnerships start with some kind of cultural assessment to see if there's even any compatibility, because you can't force that stuff. You got to work at it. Um, uh, I've been married 40 years in 3 weeks, in 3 months. And, yeah, people ask, you know, you've been married to Rose for 40 years because, the family teases me about being married to Rose because she's, very structured. And I mean, not so much. And it's guerrilla warfare. It's a lot of work. It's understanding what the trigger points are and working on those trigger points. And it's not different from partnerships and collaborations. It's the hard stuff is the soft stuff, and getting the soft stuff work right makes everything so much easier. And it took me a while to learn that. And I mean, it took me probably about 5 to 7 years when I first started being involved to really figure out. It was like an aha moment. This person is not crying because they just had to change offices. She's crying because it's a deeply personal thing I've not tapped into or engaged on before we started to talk about, okay, you're going to move to this new organization to do X, Y, and Z. Yeah, that's it.
Toyin is so right. It's really the things that you expect. So for me, it was this realization of something that we know that that people are more alike than they are different. And when you can tap into that understanding, it enables you to manage change. It enables you to work across generations. It enables you to deal with organizational culture. It really does enable you to work through the difficult work inherent in building these high impact collaborations. That when you remember those things, the things where we're the same, and build from there, it does become incredibly powerful. Sometimes it's those essential components, the people components, and remembering that and being in that mindset that really does enable you to do really powerful and impactful work.
Well, and it's interesting, that in a way that we're all saying just how relational this is, and we're in a society that is so achieving focused, right? Productivity and KPIs and getting our to-do list done, right? And relational is not at all to-do list, right? It is about being okay with something that you can't really plan for, right? Because relationships are uncertain and unpredictable. And it's being able to have that capacity. And I think, Jennifer, you said this earlier, right, about this capacity for ambiguity. It's this capacity for uncertainty, and knowing that you'll be able to figure this out, and that in large part, these relationships can withstand, right, that kind of difficult conversation and kind of challenges that come with strategic partnerships.
All of this, yes. Thank you. And that was similar but a little bit different, Judy, than the question I was going to ask to round things out. But just I'll take one more pause if there are any questions from the group, and then we'll wrap things up. Thinking back to the first partnership process that you were a part of, what would you like to tell yourself at the beginning of that work? If you could travel back to your desk before your very first collaboration and write yourself a post-it note, what would that note say?
You know, it's interesting because I take this same insight when I'm doing strategic planning work, is that, and I think I can't remember if it was Toyin or G, this the speed of things. You know, it you might have your timeline all mapped out and everything beautifully charted, but the timing, the speed, your ability to move forward constantly has to be reworked and reevaluated. It's going to take more time because it doesn't matter if you can, you know, meet your timeline deadlines when the work hasn't been actualized and it cannot be sustained. So this understanding that you may have to go slow is really super insightful.
Yeah, that's definitely what's going on my desk too.
You know, I know, Kate, we talked about this question before, but it's like I'm hearing this question again, you know, like for the first time. It's like I'm really thinking about this question. And I think for me, what I would tell my younger self is the importance of being in a truly personally centered place to do this work, right? To really invest in yourself to have the capacity for ambiguity and uncertainty, to invest in yourself to be able to have the capacity to have difficult conversations and not take things personally through this process. Because it's, you know, as you're leading this, you know, you're going to have people who are going to be upset or cry, and it's not because of you, it's because of the issue that they're working on. And for the longest time, I would conflate those two. And so it's not about me, right? So I think you just have to have this space to constantly reinvest in building this energy and capacity in this work.
Oh, and I'm on the pop because I got to put a point on Judy's. Yes, that is so true. And the two ways that I tell my clients to do this is that I'll either say, listen, you got to love people the way they need to be loved, because that is incredibly important. Or I'll tell them, sometimes we need to take one from the airline school of management. Put your mask on first, and then you can help the people around you. Okay. All right, Toy, and that's it for me.
That is like that dead on, Jennifer. I mean, I thank you for sharing that, because it goes back to what the point I'm about to make, which is, you know, telling my younger self, I would say, in addition to the other things we've talked about, I don't have to have all the answers right now. I used to stress out about that. Oh, I don't know what the new benefits plan is going to look like. You know, I would literally have sleepless nights about not having every question answered. It's okay to say, we're working on it. We'll get back to you. And here's where it is in the timeline if you have that timeline. Or I don't know works too. It makes you more relational. It makes you more humanistic. It goes back to EQ that you talked about, Jennifer. But having known when to pull that EQ lever means knowing when to say, I don't have the answer. So that I think my younger self would have moved heaven and earth to woken people up at 1 a.m. and it's all right. Don't have the answer right now. And that's good. And people actually appreciate that. That, oh, they're just like us. They don't have all the answers. So it's okay.
Yes, patience with ourselves, patience with each other, patience with the process. moving at the speed of trust.
If I could
And
just real
yeah,
quick add, I mean, what Toyin is saying is the word authentic, right? It is about being your authentic self in this process. And I would put like 20 exclamation points behind what you said, Toyin. Totally, totally on
Thank you.
point.
Thank you.
thank you all. Go out and move with the speed of trust, communicate, collaborate, and anything I or the MSI can ever do to be helpful to you in your collaboration journey, please, please, please do reach out. I am here to support this community as it works to work more and better together. So I look forward to talking with you. Thanks so much, everyone, and have a great day.